Okay, all right. All right, we got some news for you guys today. It's been a slow news month, but we've got some stuff for you today that I think you're going to really like. We've got news on an upcoming redesigned MacBook Air. We've got news on new iMacs. We've got news on new iPads. And your boy, old Lukey over here, has got 3 new exclusive tidbits about the upcoming MacBook Pro. So buckle up, sit back, put your feet up, I guess. I don't know. This is going to be a good one. We'll start by backing up to some news that came out a couple of days ago about the new MacBook Air. So according to Ming-Chi Kuo, the next MacBook Air would be redesigned and that it could apparently feature a mini LED display like that found on the new iPad Pro. So a couple of months ago, John Prosser showed us what this new MacBook Air is supposedly going to look like, and I gotta tell you, it is a stunner. Basically, the tapered design that the MacBook Air has had literally since its inception in 2008, apparently that's gone. And we are instead going to be getting a razor-thin, completely flat-sided, very iPad Pro-esque design. You can also see from John Prosser's renders that the USB-C port seems to be defining the thickness of the device, and then of course the screen on top of it, which means that it should be about as thin as an iPad Pro with a little bit of extra for the display. That's pretty unbelievable. And apparently that is also going to be a mini LED product, which honestly is really compelling. Now, we've already heard that this new MacBook Air is going to apparently feature a next generation M2 chip, and other reports have been suggesting that it could come out alongside an M2 MacBook Pro at the early half of next year, which would be really, really good news. Now, if you're following along at home, kids, you may be wondering, why are we hearing about these mini LED MacBook Airs if recent reporting has suggested that maybe we wouldn't see mini LED on the MacBook Pro? Well, I think if we are now talking about mini LED on a MacBook Air, there's a pretty good chance that it's going to be on the Pros as well, and those are most likely going to be coming out this year in the fall, probably October. Get excited for those. In fact, speaking of those new MacBook Pros, your boy's got some exclusive info for you. So I've been hired by Sam over at iUpdate to be a contributing author to Apple Track because I got 3 stories. You're going to like 2 of them, but one of them you're not going to like. But first, a word from our sponsor. Salutations, viewers. It is I, Fancy Luke, and I'm here to inform you of a simply sensational promotional offer from my friends at WeVPN. If you haven't heard of WeVPN, it was created by some longtime industry veterans that left the big VPNs behind to make a simple, affordable, and trustworthy service that you can rely on. There are lots of VPNs out there, but WeVPN is laser focused on protecting your browsing without storing any data whatsoever. Now look, I'm a fancy guy, so I only watch Downton Abbey, but chances are you probably watch other things as well, and WeVPN's streaming unblocking gives you access to local libraries of over 350 streaming websites. WeVPN has a ton of great features, is easy to use, plus they support the channel. The summer sale is live now, so give it a try. A 2-year service plus an extra 3 months free is 74% off for just $2.59 per month. Plus, if you're fancy like me, then you can use code Luke for an additional 10% off with the link in the description below. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a gala to attend. Are you guys ready for some Luke Miani exclusive leaks? I'm so excited! Alright, so the first one. Apparently, the Touch ID sensor on the new MacBook Pro is going to be backlit. And I know what you're thinking. I mean, I guess so, right? The whole keyboard's backlit. Not just the keyboard backlight that includes Touch ID, but a specific Touch ID backlight with multiple dedicated LEDs. So this might seem a little weird, like what is that going to look like? Well, Basically, what I'm thinking is, if you'll recall, the new iMac has a little ring around the Touch ID sensor, which is in the top right corner of the keyboard. But the iMac keyboard isn't backlit, so it's just a static ring. Whereas on a MacBook, I would imagine that that ring is gonna be illuminated. Thus, it would give you the potential to, I don't know, maybe have some animations or something. Like, imagine if when you open the lid and it's time to hit the Touch ID sensor to log in, what if the little ring glows? Maybe it pulses, or maybe a little circle animation runs around the ring, something like that. It's also possible that this illuminated sensor could feature multiple colors, so maybe it flashes blue when you do Apple Pay or something like that. What do you think a backlit Touch ID sensor could be used for? Let me know in the comments below. Not the biggest piece of news in the world, but I think it's pretty interesting. Speaking of which, the second exclusive that I have for you guys is one that you're probably gonna like if you're into video and photo editing. It's been long rumored that the new generation of MacBook Pro is going to be bringing back the SD card slot, but new information is saying that this new SD card slot is going to feature UHS 2 technology. If you know what that means, then you probably know it from the iMac Pro and the 2020 27-inch iMac. The SD card slot on both of those is UHS. UHS 2 is a faster standard which allows for read-write speeds of up to 312 megabytes per second compared to around 100 megabytes per second, which you would get on a normal SD card slot. And let me tell you, as someone who edits 4K footage for a living, it makes a big difference. When I upgraded to my iMac Pro, the UHS 2 SD card was a huge bonus, and we're now going to be seeing that on a laptop as well. This is really big if you are a big user of SD cards like I am. But now, unfortunately, I've got some bad news, because the new MacBook Pro, according to this exclusive information, is not going to feature a 64 gigabyte RAM option. So currently, you can configure an Intel 16-inch MacBook Pro with up to 64 gigs of RAM and an 8 terabyte SSD. The 8 terabyte SSD is going to stay 100%, but I'm extremely doubtful that it would receive 64 gigabytes of RAM as an upgrade. Everything that I've seen is saying 16 and 32. Now, obviously, no 8, that is what we would expect on the 16-inch MacBook Pro. Still not 100% sure about the 14. There still could be an 8 gigabyte base model, but I believe that the M1X will have 2 RAM options, 16 and 32. So right now, if you actually look at the M1 chip itself, there are 2 visible RAM chips. Those are either 2 4 gigabyte chips or 2 8 gigabyte chips. On the M1X, you could basically double that. There would either be 4 gigabyte or 4 8 gigabyte chips, but there will not be a 64 gigabyte RAM option. Now, for most people, this probably isn't going to be that big of a deal. 16 and 32 gigabytes of RAM are going to be more than fine, especially with Apple Silicon and the optimization that is associated with. However, I'm sure there will be some people that will complain about, it's a downgrade from the previous model. Are you bummed about not having a 64 gigabyte RAM option, or does that really not matter to you at all? Let me know in the comments below. The thing that's interesting about this is that previously Mark Gurman had been saying that the new M1X MacBook Pros would be available with up to 64 gigabytes of RAM. And as far as I know, the M1X could be available in other devices such as a Mac Mini or an iMac Pro with 64 gigabytes, but for the MacBook Pro, I do not believe that 64 gigabytes of RAM will be an option. In fact, speaking of both Mark Gurman and the larger iMac, get a lot of this big brain transition here, apparently Mark Gurman is now saying that Apple is planning a more powerful chip in the larger iMac, but that he has no idea when we're going to actually expect this. He said that it would likely be an M1X, the beefier version of the current M1, or perhaps even an M2X processor. I think that really speaks to the uncertainty of when this is all going to be. I mean, an M2X would imply end of 2022, really, because we're not expecting to see next generation M2 chips this year or even early next year. There have been a number of reports saying that the new MacBook Air would be coming in the early half of next year with an M2 chip. However, people have also been saying that the M1X MacBook Pros were going to happen at WWDC. So who's to say whether or not that has been delayed further? So we could be looking at more than a year until we get this new larger iMac. I would expect though that this larger iMac would have the same M1X chip that you'd be able to buy in the MacBook Pro, as well as an M1X Mac Mini. Now I've gotten a lot of questions about this new Mac Mini. Personally, I think that the Mac Mini makes sense to unveil alongside the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro, which would hopefully happen around October or November of this year. However, some have thrown some cold water on that, saying the Mac Mini might come out alongside the new redesigned MacBook Air next year. Either way, I think the Mac Mini is going to be here within a year. And I don't know, I just don't see why Apple wouldn't release it alongside the new MacBook Pro if, as we are all assuming, it's going to share the processor. And honestly, I think that's going to be a really compelling device, especially given that we are looking at an uncertain timetable for this larger M1X iMac, a 30 or a 32-inch model. So far, Apple hasn't changed their pricing structures as they've been switching over to Apple Silicon. The MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro are identical in pricing to the Intel ones they replace. You've also got the new iMac, which directly replaced the 4K iMac that also kept the same pricing, and the Mac Mini actually got $100 cheaper to start with. So I think it's a pretty safe bet that this new M1X Mac Mini would replace the $1,099 Intel iMac. So you'd be paying $1,100 for an M1X Mac Mini. That's insane. That is incredible value. The M1 Mac Mini is already a really great value, and that would just be stupidly good. So to recap, we've got a new redesigned MacBook Air coming next year. That would be really cool. Hopefully a new larger screened iMac next year as well as a redesigned and very value heavy Mac Mini, and a couple of new exclusive tidbits on the upcoming MacBook Pro. I think honestly, that's pretty good news, right? We've been struggling for some news for a while, and there you go, you got some news. If you liked it, make sure to leave a comment down below and tell me what you're most excited for, and as usual, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.